Hi guys, welcome to the next segment here. This is stealth. We're here to talk about stealth for a minute, which is our interaction as free people and Americans and people from other countries as well, but humans with our government. So when the Constitution was written hundreds of years ago now, it spread like a wildfire throughout the world. There's countries all over the world now that have their Constitution that are modeled after the United States Constitution. It's important to remember the history of that. The history was that we did not want to live in a place where we didn't want to live in a place where it can arbitrarily make new rules. We wanted to live by a written law, and but it's important to understand as we get into that no amount of written law, no amount of can govern people that aren't actually willing to govern themselves. So say, for example, you got a town of 100 people and you decide you want a sheriff. Okay, that works if there's only a couple bad guys. The sheriff can track them down. But what happens if there's 20 bad guys and there's one sheriff? What happens if there's 30 bad guys and there's one sheriff? Government is a Republican form of government is contingent upon the people mainly governing themselves, and then there's a little bit of a need for the government to step in. A Republican form of government was never designed to govern a lawless people. As the people become less and less self-governing, the government grows. As the people take less and less responsibility for themselves, the government expands. So if I say to you, it's my responsibility to handle my garbage, there's no need for the government to get involved in garbage service. But if enough of us say, we can't handle our garbage, we're just going to throw it out the window onto the street. Now there's garbage on the street. Now there's a mess out there. Now there's bugs and rats and infestation in the streets. There becomes this growing cry, kind of a, hey, somebody solved this problem. And then a lot of times the government is willing to say, I'll solve that problem for you if you just pay me some money. And so the people surrender their responsibility of handling their own garbage, for example, to the government. And the government says, okay, I'm going to handle your garbage. And now the taxes go up, the freedom goes down a little bit, and this is how government grows. And I'm not saying every time government grows, it's a bad thing. What I'm saying is, in order to understand our relationship with government, we have to understand this principle. If we handle our business on our own and take responsibility for ourselves, our need for government decreases. When we don't take responsibility for ourselves, the need for something to govern us increases.
The scriptures actually talk a lot about stewardship or being good stewards, and that kind of just means like taking responsibility for something or having responsibility over something. And I think if we don't have property, like when people start living so close to each other, like in big cities, then we stop having things to I guess, take care of, or resources, like personal resources. We start relying on everyone else and the government as well for food, for entertainment. You don't have anywhere for your kids to go play in the yard, and lots of other things.
Well, yeah, so there's these key principles, you have to understand them in order to actually kind of be able to discuss this. So at this point in time, in every jurisdiction, in every city, there's different levels of governing and different levels of personal responsibility. What I believe is that there's been kind of an overreach of government, and it's time to whittle that back down a little bit. But you can't whittle down the government unless people are ready to take responsibility for themselves. If as long as I'm gonna throw the garbage on the street, as long as I'm gonna throw the garbage out the window, there's gonna be a demand for somebody to pick up that garbage. And so these two things balance each other. Um, so, keep that in mind when you go in there and you say, you do want this or you don't want this. Elon Musk made an interesting comment a couple weeks ago. He says, anytime you want the government to grow, just think, would I want the DMV to do this? The DMV is a very personal interaction that a lot of us have with how government actually works. And like we've said in other podcasts, like we don't have a problem. Our fight isn't against the person that works at the DMV. They're doing their job. They're probably doing it the best they can. And most Americans actually say their interaction with the government customer service person is very friendly and very helpful. But what actually happens at the DMV, you have to wait for 4 hours before you get a turn to visit. And you have to say, is this really how we want things to be run? If you say, okay, let's have the DMV run healthcare. Okay. What do you expect is going to happen? Do you think your service is going to be quick and easy, or do you think it's going to become slow and less efficient?
I think when the government owns something and is making money off of something, it's like too overpowered, because they can also make laws where they do govern, suppressing other businesses or competition for that thing. So like when government takes over healthcare in Canada, like all of a sudden they're the only ones providing healthcare pretty much, because they make it very difficult for any other medical associations or clinics to form and grow. And then you need a heart surgery and you can't get in for 6 months and you die, because they don't do enough.
Well, that's the question you have to ask yourself as you consider this thing. That's why it's interesting. Whether you agree with Elon or not, it's worth thinking about. Do we really want government to do this thing, whatever this thing is? Is the efficiency going to improve or decrease? The problem, like Gavin just mentioned, government is a monopoly, right? That's the difference. So if the garbage service is a public garbage service, one of the first things the government will do is it will say nobody else is allowed to collect garbage in this geographical area. Okay, so right off the bat, they've created a monopoly. So nobody else can compete with that. The second thing that happens, all the money that used to go to other places collecting garbage is now going to the government in the form of a fee or a tax. Okay, so now you say, well, maybe another garbage company is going to get started and compete with that. Well, everybody's already paying for this garbage service because it's a tax now. There's now a law that says nobody else can make a garbage service in this geographical area. And so the innovation of a free market right off the bat gets severely undermined by this thing. Now, again, that's a decision that people make collectively. They decide, but a lot of times we don't understand that we're choosing to create a monopoly. So if everyone's being taxed for healthcare, now if you want to get other healthcare, you still have to pay your tax, but now you have to come up with extra healthcare money to buy your private service. Same thing with schools. If the government school is in place, everybody's school money is already going to that. Now you want to compete with that or have some alternatives, you have to come up with your own money to do that because you're already being taxed for the existing school.
That's when you start feeling oppressed. I was talking to Charlie about this the other day. He's just learning to drive, so he's driving me around. He's got his permit, and I got a ticket the other day because our truck didn't have registration up to date, and I saw that and it was ridiculous. Like, why do I even need to register a car? Like, you never had to register your horses, and
Some places you did.
really, it's just like when the government starts
Well,
to
in some places the government grew enough to where that was required.
yeah. But when the government starts to grow so much, it's like, and you start feeling like there's less opportunities, to like start business because of how many like restrictions and laws there are. It just stops like society just stops functioning. Less people can actually work. Actually, yeah.
And that is oppressive or depressing. And it kind of kills the creative spark that we all have. So getting back just for a moment to this comment, to this thing. So what is constitutional, right? A lot of times people say, well, that's not constitutional. So we all have to understand the Constitution of the United States outlined the form within its own papers, those original 10 papers. It outlined the form to change the laws. So the Constitution does not say you cannot change this law. The Constitution actually shows you how to change the law. And so the original Constitution, like we talked about on some of these other episodes, was only 10 pages, and they were very small pages. 10 pages. Then the Bill of Rights was another couple pages. Now, the government papers have grown now to fill a room. We joke how you can't even actually find out how many papers it is now because it's constantly changing. Hundreds of different agencies, hundreds of different districts. The paperwork is always changing, constantly being edited, judges' rulings. But it's important to understand that just because it changed didn't make it unconstitutional. In fact, our country says that if the person who's the president agrees with what the Congress has produced and the courts do not say it is wrong, when those three things all happen at the same time, the Congress writes it down, the governing executive, the president or the governor or the mayor signs it, and the courts don't overrule it, that is in fact constitutional. So just because we have a room full of papers that's now governing us does not mean it is unconstitutional. And I'm not saying it is either. What I'm saying is our Constitution says that you can make new laws. And as long as the Congress and the president and the courts all agree that it's okay, then something that didn't used to be constitutional can become constitutional. Now, we need great people to make arguments sometimes to the contrary and say that is actually unconstitutional. And that's where you get this debate that's been going on for 250 years in America about what the current law is. And that's why it constantly changes. But we as Americans need to participate in that discussion by being understanding of it first off. So it doesn't do us any good to go marching into a room and say, that's unconstitutional, when in 1950 the president signed the law that Congress passed and the courts upheld it. Because our Constitution says it. So it may be that it does not align with the original founding fathers' intent, And that's where you can start to make this argument and maybe convince a Congress and convince a president and convince the courts to change their interpretation, maybe back to more in line with the original intention of the Constitution.
Yeah, like here in, I don't know if it was Oregon or like the whole United States. I know they were trying to ban guns. I think during the Obama administration.
They've tried it many times in all kinds of jurisdictions, right?
Yeah,
And they made a lot of progress. There's a lot of rules now governing guns.
and the Constitution says you have the right to arm or self-defense.
So that's the discussion. So yeah, so the point of this kind of segment, we're going to wrap it up now today for stealth, is that these discussions have been going on for 250 years, even more. And we don't win by just barging in there and making a couple remarks and then leaving. The people that win the discussion over time are the people that persist and keep arguing and keep discussing it and keep, making, in essence, making a law. Or sometimes making a law means repealing an old law. So just because somebody passed it in 1920 doesn't mean we necessarily agree with it, or it doesn't mean that the original founding fathers agree with it. So we have to get involved in those discussions and get the people that we've elected to these positions to understand what we think and why we think it. And then we can hopefully take this stack of papers that fills an entire room now and kind of edit it down gradually over time, unregulate it, free up some of the creative genius of America, win back some of our freedoms, so that's kind of where stealth starts, but understanding what is constitutional is a big part of that. And then the last thing I'm just going to say today, because I just want to get it out there, is you do not hold anybody you elect accountable by chastising them on social media. You don't hold them accountable by sending them a letter. Elected people are held accountable one time every election cycle. If they win their election again, trust me, they think that they have the support of the people. If they don't win the election, they get a clear idea that they don't have the support of the people, right? So we do all these things and then we re-elect people. We're not holding them accountable if we just always re-elect them. So keep that in mind, right? The only way you actually hold elected people accountable is at election time. And if you just keep sending the same people back there, they start to think that they're doing it the right way, however it is that they're doing. And so you understand they just keep doing the same thing. They keep doing the government. Like right now, they're raising the debt ceiling again. They raised it 2 years ago. They raised it again. They just keep doing it. Well, why do they keep doing it? Well, they keep getting elected. So if they keep getting elected, why they don't think they're doing the wrong thing, right? So that's another interesting discussion. But anyways, that's our stealth segment for today. We put the cat to sleep. Hope you didn't put you to sleep, but you can follow us on Freedom Bees on Facebook, Instagram, or on YouTube right now. We're going to get started on some podcasts as well, and there'll be some other places to follow us. But for right now, that's our stealth segment. Stay tuned. We're going to come back in a minute with our wealth segment. So